This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz for the AI XR podcast. That is right. After 4.5 years, we are changing our name to be a little bit more relevant to the current conversation. And as Roni has said many times, AI is exactly what XR has been waiting for. So the conversation has kind of converged. And of course, Roni is doing an AI startup. So it is going to be a major topic for us going forward. And I think everybody who listens to this podcast at least realizes that, and certainly CES confirmed that AI is just going to be everywhere. Integrated into everything.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, Charlie, as you said that, the Siri on my Mac is like, "Are you ready to experience the new personal Apple intelligence?" And I'm like, "No, I'm on a podcast. Go away right now."
Yeah, welcome to the new order, Roni.
yes, it's very contextually aware.
Yep.
So, what a week it's been for us, Ted.
Well, you and I were at CES all week. We had our big XR/AI gathering at Area 15, which was nice and fun, and it was great to see the community.
There's 80 people there.
Yeah. And of course, remotely up until yesterday, you and I have been dealing with all the drama of what's going on in Los Angeles now with the terrifying and disastrous fires. So a lot of friends and colleagues have been deeply impacted by that.
The scale of the destruction is hard to comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys haven't been, are you back in LA yet, or
Just back. We're just
have
back.
you seen the fires or seen some of it driving through, or?
No, everything's pretty blocked off. I mean,
I saw the fires from the air when we were landing in Burbank. But my neighborhood in Glendale, which is just less than 5 miles from the Rose Bowl and from the Eaton fire that destroyed Altadena, we could see it on the ridge about 5 miles away. So Tuesday night was pretty apocalyptic. But then when I landed Wednesday morning, things were shockingly normal, except for the shower of ash that was raining over this part of the valley. And then the winds did not return last night as predicted, and it looks like they're not going to start up again until Monday and Tuesday. So hopefully they'll be able to get some containment before then. When you look at the scale of the response and the number of people on the ground, and you just wonder, did they get time off? Did they get to go to sleep? Thank God for that army of people tirelessly trying to save the city.
Yeah.
But it is really terrifying to be in the middle of that. It's a little like the pandemic. It makes you feel very small, right? And we are just little people who are victims of nature and history, just like our ancestors were. So, it is a strange, strange moment, a strange feeling. Been trying to sit down and write the column and write my CES story, but yesterday I could just sort of clean up my yard. I mean, those winds knocked over a grill that weighs over 100 pounds. They moved it 5 feet and knocked it over. I could not lift it up. And so that is how strong those winds were. So obviously, a fire is just going to get whipped up into an incredible inferno. With all that said, we have a great guest today, Dean Takahasi, who is the lead writer for VentureBeat and GamesBeat. Dean is a veteran journalist. I think he's been doing this since the early 90s. So he's got me beat. And
He's great. He's great.
I can't wait to get his perspective on CES. When you see him moving through CES, he's like a shark moving through the water. He hits everything so fast, and then he remembers everything. I don't see him taking notes, but somehow he remembers everything and writes these great.
I think he's one of the best, game media tech journalists because he's fair. He's an enthusiast. He loves games himself. He's gonna be a great guest.
Yeah. He's a truth teller. So,
Well, he's the ultimate description of not his first rodeo, right? So
right, exactly, exactly.
he
So,
knows what he's doing. He knows what he's
But he
looking for.
isn't out to get you. You know,
No,
like
not at
having
all.
been on the receiving side of interviews with Dean, he's fair, but he's not the journalist that's trying to stab you in the back or something. He's just like, but he's not a fanboy either.
no,
Like
he's a
he
truth
does real
teller.
good
Yeah,
journalism.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, with all of that said, the news this week outside of CES seemed to be a political conversation around free speech, and that's going on today in the Supreme Court arguments about TikTok. But it also is very relevant because Mark Zuckerberg made a video announcement that they are going to cease their moderation of political conversation, uh,
Hmm.
disinformation, right? It's not up to Meta anymore to discern what is the truth and to suppress what are lies. And
Yeah.
and so I mean, this is the conundrum of both social media and now with AI amplification. What happens when we can't tell what's true anymore?
Well, and I think this goes back to a continual circular argument and discussion about all of these compute-based platforms that just pump media from whatever source, allows it to just drop in there. And I don't remember the statute. There's a number for it, but is it a platform or is it actually a media outlet, right? And responsible and controlled by the FCC or not? And I think always the desire is to not try and be a official media outlet because then they have certain degrees of responsibility and an ethical code to represent what is truthful and try and manage that. So it becomes kind of an issue. So I think they're taking this opportunity to move even further away from that danger zone. Do you guys agree?
I think it's just really hard to moderate content on that scale. And you've got an issue of separate countries and separate concerns. Uh, Facebook has been accused of contributing to genocide in Myanmar, and I get why Facebook is hesitant. The scale, by the way, especially in the third world countries, but even here in the United States, the scale of some of the criminal content and other kinds of content is literally driven moderators crazy. They get
Yes.
PSD. So, hopefully, again, I was disappointed that the announcement wasn't that we're going to let AI help us do this tremendously hard problem, right? Because they're just punting responsibility on it. So in
Mhm.
2016, I mean, in 2016, and even during the Biden administration, they were kind of forced, I think, against their will into trying it. But now that they've tried it, they see how hard it really is.
And how
And
futile
there
it
are
is.
unintended consequences to moderation.
Yeah.
But I think it is, social media needs to be regulated. I've said that 100 times on this show. I'm not a huge fan of regulation, but this is bad. I mean, this is undermining democracy, and it is providing a forum for voices that, in my opinion, should be suppressed. Not every voice is equal. People yelling fire in a theater or people who are advocating violence should be censored. We wouldn't allow somebody to do that in public. So this is public now. This is what in public means now. But how to do it, how to be fair, how to avoid the unintended consequences of truly suppressing free speech instead of dangerous speech is a fine line. Weirdly, Zuckerberg, the Associated Press ran a story. Apparently, he was wearing a handmade $900,000 watch, designer watch, while he was making this announcement. So, I mean, Zuck is,
C-
love him or hate him, he is a
Sure.
tone deaf billionaire.
Can I be cynical here for a second?
Please
I
go
think
ahead.
uh this is appeasing the new king.
Yeah,
This is pivoting and paying homage, as a lot of people have been doing, and going to Palm Beach.
yeah.
And
Kissing the ring.
and by the way, like this is my cynicism here, but this is not for this podcast, but maybe not for today. But I think the idea that free speech, as our founding fathers and hopefully there weren't many founding fathers and mothers were thinking about in this country. Why was there free? The king was suppressing the speech, and if you tried to actually say something open and truthful, you were punished and executed and all these horrible things. They're using free speech as a way to allow misinformation and real hate to come back. It's an inversion of free speech. And that's what's really cynical about this. It's like very Orwellian that they, under the guise of free speech, let's introduce the idea that like facts are not true. Let's renew old hatreds and old racisms and let them circulate unabated. That's not why this country was started to provide a haven for people escaping tyranny, is giving tyranny a voice again. And that's like this is a different podcast, but like I think that's what they're feeding under the banner of like, who is waving the banner of free. The free speech has been going very well in this country for hundreds of years. We've been the safe place in the world. And now what they're doing is opening up the realm for fascists and all sorts of extremists to say hateful, nasty, revisionist things like things that happen in the world. Let's pretend they didn't happen. Let's make up things that are not true and jam them down your throat so that under the guise of free speech, you believe mistruths and misinformation. So I know this stuff. This is a very big problem that needs.
Yeah, well, and this is this
part
gets
of the
to a
reason
very
they're
deep.
kissing the ring is that they want to avoid regulation, both of AI and of
Yes, of
social
course.
media. And that's worth tens of billions. Zuckerberg and Tim Cook can give Trump millions of dollars and they get it back on the stock price the next week.
Yeah, I mean, this gets into a very beyond even ethical. It becomes a philosophical discussion, Roni. What you're touching on is when you understand what the democratization of technology does to allow anybody to become media, right? And to deliver a message and use an outlet, right? That's effectively what YouTube is. You can put anything up in any way, shape, or form with almost no cost, right? I mean, with the capture devices, the creation devices, the delivery devices. So now you have this kind of wonderland of that is amazing, right? And we're living in it right now. We're living in that world. So it becomes you remove all the gates, right? You remove all of the layers of people watching and saying, okay, well, that's fine, but that doesn't get out into the world. You can talk about that in the dark corners of your little club or whatever, but that's not mainstream deliverable like narrative to the world, right? So we create a real issue with technology, and this is no different than many other issues that we have with the democratization of technology. But I don't think anybody would argue we want to go backwards, right? So it becomes a really interesting philosophical discussion. It's a university discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's gonna end up being, as I said, a tech free for all for the next 4 years, and they're paying for it. I mean, this is a very, very transactional government,
Yeah.
and we'll see what's going to happen. I mean, it has been hollowed out from the inside, which is what's happened to other democracies over time uh, when people stop participating in legitimate ways. And the other thing is, people this country was not constructed as a democracy. It was constructed to suppress voices of minorities and people who are not virtuous rural white people. That was the plan for anybody who is concerned or reveres the population. Having New York have two senators for 20 million people is equal to Wyoming having two senators for 400,000 people. So it was constructed to repress voices like ours and to elevate voices from the southern and rural states. That was the plan. So for people who are revering democracy, keep in mind that this republic was terrified of democracy. They believed it caused the fall of Rome and Athens. They debated that heavily, heavily, believe it or not, because those were the proof points that people had in 1790. Were those classic civilizations about which we had the most knowledge because they were writers and philosophers who kept records. So, that to me is the fundamental problem here, and it allows a group of people to undermine the system by leveraging those built-in inequalities. And anyway, yes, it's unfortunately with tech, what we're learning through this podcast is everything eventually becomes political.
Mhm.
And that is something
Even
that,
the fires,
yeah,
right? Like the thing that was surprising me is how people are blaming the fires on, one like it's this party or the other party's issue. So one is like, oh, you're cutting budgets,
but that's
therefore the
not
fire
true. That
is your
didn't
fault.
happen. That's
And it's
disinformation. That
not true.
didn't
Yeah, it is
happen.
disinformation. But here's the other thing, like they're also waving a flag and supporting Doge. That's going to wholesale cut everything across the. So to save trillions of dollars, they're going to cut fire and police and defense and education. So when things burn down and no one's there and no one's taking those jobs anymore, what's going to happen? So
They're
there's
going to
this
blame. They're going to
weird-
blame the other guys.
correct.
They're going to create disinformation. So, this is the problem, and we just keep chasing our tails. And the same tech that is giving us this podcast and so much more is also responsible for these growing inequalities and exploiting a system that is supposed to promote entrepreneurship. We had Gary on last week. And we were talking about this very thing, right? How do you create an environment where there is reasonable regulation to protect intellectual property and other assets, but at the same time allows unfettered innovation? And now we see another big news story that broke today is that Meta apparently did exactly what OpenAI did when building its Llama models, which is they stole everything on the internet.
Mhm.
I don't know whether they penetrated firewalls the way OpenAI did, which to me is their biggest crime. But meanwhile, there's the whole body of the internet that they've claimed they can use under fair use. And apparently, in the stories, this came from their legal department after much debate. They said, we're going to rely on fair use and we'll take it to the Supreme
But
Court.
Charlie, here's the Orwellian part on that. Like, could you go into Meta and steal all their source code and say it's fair use? No, they'll fight you. But they can go do that to everyone else and say it's fair use. So there's something very weird and asymmetrical and like very unethical about what's going on. Where the like what the companies are doing to us, they absolutely don't want done to them. God forbid you do that to them and they'll like rain, holy fire on you. So there's this like somehow the court system in this country has got to get its handle on organizing what is fair, what is not. Is there IP? Is there not IP? Because if there's no IP, the entire economy changes. It's a free for all. And if it's going to be a free for all, then let it be a free for all for everybody. But if some people are playing by the rules and others are not, that's truly unfair. And that's what's going on. There's a lack of fairness in the system where all these small companies and business and individuals think that IP, copyrights, protection, patents protect you. The big companies are like, we could just run right over them. We could just mow you down like they don't exist. That fair use question is like, we get to steal from you, but you don't get to steal from us. Something is wrong there. And I don't know how it's going to get resolved, but it has to get solved here. Wonder what Dean thinks about this.
I don't know. I just sent Dean a note. Dean, where are you? Oh, let's see whether he's here.
Well, as you're working on that,
Yep.
maybe we hard fork. I mean, these are questions we're going to be grappling with,
I was like,
for
it's too
No,
early in the
there's
morning,
no,
man.
I
I
mean,
need my
this is
coffee.
there is no one correct answer here. So
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for some other point of view, but merely pointing out that the current situation, as Roni did, is fundamentally flawed.
Yes, of
And
course.
so, in a way, when you hear people on the right saying the system is fundamentally flawed, you do kind of agree. But how it's flawed and how to fix it, of course,
Well,
is
how to unravel what has so many layers of raveling now
yeah,
becomes
yeah.
the
And
problem.
of course, it all comes back to tech and the oligarchs that are emerging because of it.
But what I was going to say while you're checking on Dean's status is we should do a hard fork into a little CES discussion
Yeah,
of
let's go to CES. Let's go to CES. Absolutely. What did you think this year?
well, I just wanted to do a hard fork into discussion. Say hi to Nala, my friend's dog, because we
Oh,
have folks staying.
yeah.
Uh,
Ted's got a dog on the
we're
podcast.
like a little bit of a
Listen to
refugee camp.
Everybody listens on audio, so we have to do like a Howard Stern and describe
Yeah,
the video.
we're a little bit of a fire refugee
Dog
camp
chewing on your arm.
last few days. But no, oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so the big sort of AI touch points, I think, were very NVIDIA focused. In fact, Roni, you talk about audio versus a visual component. You're challenging your Jensen leather jacket, although he wore kind of a sparkly Vegas leather jacket when he did his big giant
This
keynote.
is a World War II A2 fighter pilot
Yeah,
jacket.
it's the
So
exact opposite of what he wore.
there we go.
But they made some gigantic announcements. I'm sure Dean is probably all over that, writing discussions about what they're doing now with the Blackwell chips, bringing them into sort of the consumer realm with the GeForce stuff and this little home sort of supercomputer that will run a localized AI model called
Well, my
Digits.
my
And
my 4080, which is the previous version, runs AI models independent of the internet just great.
yeah, well, and now you're going to get
Very,
3x, 4x.
very powerful computer.
So Nvidia was showing, and then of course AMD was showing similar things, just with like not quite the amount of aplomb. Appliances, things that were localized. The belief structure is that this tokenization of AI, and Roni, you probably have some things to say about this, where this kind of pay to play model and everything is sitting on this cloud compute grid, and the power draw of that becomes a continual challenge and concerns about the economic viability of it. So now people are seeing this kind of attempt to pivot to how we use computers today, which is everybody's got localized processors and localized resources. Still uses power, of course, but not to the same level. So maybe you guys have some thoughts on that because that made quite a bit of news at CES.
Yeah,
Um,
just go on, Charlie.
no, I was going to say the other part of Jensen's announcement was about robotics. And that general, he said robotics are going to make um, Nvidia and the industry in general multi-trillions of dollars. Of course, there were not a lot of very impressive robots there at CES. So, in this case, the software and the thinking about it may be ahead of the actual hardware. I expected to see a lot more drones at the show than I did. I guess the drone makers must be busy making more drones for Ukraine.
I
But I
did
thought,
see a Ukraine company, a Ukraine drone manufacturer that was actually showing micro military drones that were basically disposable bomb droppers, and they were demonstrating
oh, I did
as a
not see
consumer
that.
product at
I was
CES.
looking for it.
Yeah, it was there. I saw. I talked to the woman that
Where
was
is
there.
it?
She's from Ukraine.
Was it at the Venetian?
No, it was in the main. It was in the main hall. It was like in the central hall, in the back of the central hall. Um, and fascinating. They're there being entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and
I mean that vision of the sky buzzing with drones in the future instead of say Amazon delivery trucks, could certainly become true, but it would be
yeah.
an interesting kind of sound pollution, the hundreds of drones flying overhead to get wherever they're going. Um, and of course that horrifying YouTube movie where drones use computer vision to hunt down individuals,
Mhm.
based on facial recognition and then collide with them the way Ukrainian drone collides with a tank.
I
Uh,
mean, this reality, by the way, in the Middle East, in Russia, Ukraine war, in parts of China, both in conflict, but also like in delivery of food. Like you could walk along the Great Wall of China, order food, and a drone will bring you food right now. So they're living in a unevenly distributed future that we're not privy to yet here in this country in the same way. It's a weird future. Like I don't know if we are fully ready for it. But I wanted to answer Ted your question about the kind of like AI predictions by Jensen and Charlie's question. I think the edge-based AI disconnected from at least not fully disconnected, but like more you have AI power in your phone, in your tablet, in your car, on your computer, which is like more of like inference-based AI, going to be really big. I think this is the next huge wave. What we're doing is sort of part of that in my startup. So I think that's a really big deal. The cloud systems where everything goes through, they are inefficient. Nuclear plants to run data centers doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think this will cause robustness and frothiness in the market at just the right time when the capital markets are going to kind of explode into this area. That's all good. The robot part, this is where trillionaires go to become billionaires and billionaires go to become millionaires. And what I mean by that is I think people get enamored with the humanoid robot. And you got to ask the question, we're like, what, 8, 9 billion human beings. who can fit into all the different spaces and sit and do stuff. And you have breakfast, lunch, dinner. They don't have to be plugged in, and they don't need to be working behind cages. They can't accidentally lop your head off. Maybe they can if under certain circumstances. But the humanoid robot is not the panacea. The contradictory thing I'll say is that robotics could be very helpful when they're very tuned to a particular use case that is truly not fit for human beings. Unfortunately, most of the humanoid robots are like taking like blue collar worker jobs. Like, what are you trying to do? You want to have like a revolution in the streets where like all factory jobs and things are like taken over, and now you have like just decay in the lower middle class of the population. Like that doesn't make any sense. There are great places, and I think we showed in Mako how a robot could fit in to do exotic things that are really hard and then blend with people. But the idea that like Amazon's going to replace all of its workers with like a humanoid robot, what is that going to do in the end for all those people that actually needed that job? What are they going to do? And I think that thoughtlessness about what happens to those displaced workers, this is staging like a Terminator type conflict. Like, and in fact, I think these people who are doing it were inspired by those movies in the wrong way.
Yeah,
I don't know
well,
if I told this to you guys. I'm going to finish on this, but like we all watch movies, and I think we all root for the same team. I think some of the folks I compete with in tech watch Star Wars and wanted to be the Death Star guy. They wanted to be Vader. Like I was like, oh my God, like we were watching the same movie, but they were rooting for the other team. And I think you're seeing some of that in tech.
Well, you touch on maybe the most salient point is the humanistic form versus the non-humanistic form. We know for sure that Amazon and other large logistics companies are using non-humanistic form robotics at scale already. These little
Yes.
moving Lego block things that move things around and are sort of human assist. But to your point, they're removing, 90% of the workforce for picking and the mobility side of it. I think maybe the same argument could be made about automobiles, right? Automobiles are essentially sort of half robotic, half human creatures that live at scale all across the planet and create mobility and logistics, right? But there's still a human element, although now we have autonomous, semi-autonomous, and eventually full autonomous without human involvement. So, like Waymo and others that are starting to show you that you can remove the human element effectively. Maybe not cost effectively yet, but starting to get on the cusp, right? So
Could I
here we
say
go.
something which will be the next version of this podcast? Which it's like AI, XR, and then like outer space. But I think the reason for all these humanoid workers and all this AI is like we ultimately do have to get off the planet at some point. We're going to get overcrowded. We need resource, and the universe has like infinite resources for us to explore. That's where it's very helpful to send a team of robots to get Mars ready for some people or
Yep.
go visit things. And like that doesn't conflict with our life on this planet. But the problem is to then shove that and have us compete with our own creations with limited resources on this planet. That's a problem. And no one is thinking, I don't know if anyone's thinking properly about like all these humanoids, send them to Neptune, send them to other galaxies, have them discover things where it's dangerous for us.
Yeah.
Where you can't survive the
Great
trip, but an
point.
AI robot could.
That is
That's
a
a bit
great
out
point.
there for this podcast, but
I don't think it's out
that,
there. I think that's the reality of what
That's
we as humans look to do is if we're taking a human form and putting it in a genuinely massively unsafe environment, we'll find a way to remote that. We'll find a way to do, something that doesn't require the human physical form.
have them colonize the moon, have them terraform Mars so that one day people can live there. Send millions of these robots to go build like, a safe place and create like vegetation on Mars and all this stuff, but don't have them take over like a blue collar job here in this country and in this world. Like well, that's not the right idea. Anyway.
Well, let's get back to CES for a second. So here's my hot take on the show. I'm
Hmm.
interested in your reaction, Ted, and I'll take it in two parts. One is the AI part, highly touted AI getting integrated with everything. I did not, thankfully, see an AI enabled toilet, but no doubt next year somebody will fill that in. Uh, the problem was everybody's showing you the same device they showed you last year, telling you that there's AI on board, but they can't demo it in the convention center because of the bad
Because they
Wi-Fi.
don't have good connectivity. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I, so after a while, I even stopped asking to demo it because they were all telling me the same story. So that was one thing. I mean, that's not CES's fault, obviously. The other thing I thought was that the XR area was sad.
Mm.
Um, Xreal and Rokid were the real companies there. There were some other companies, uh, the Israeli company you introduced me to last year that
Yeah, every site. We should have them on the show. He's a really interesting guy. Yeah.
so they have a monochromatic monocular display that is good for directions and things that might be, directions and telemetry and other data if you need to keep your heads up the way you do on a motorcycle. Whether the other applications really matter, I think Vuzix tried pretty hard on that and got nowhere fast. I don't know that that's a gadget that runners and other people want. And again, they can use audio. They don't need to have glasses. I saw the Halliday glasses. A lot of glasses were over in Eureka Park, not
Yeah, I
in the
saw them too. Yeah.
area. The Halliday glasses are similar. They have a tiny little display that can show you things like, um, short text messages
Yeah,
and
it's just a
Anything that
little.
blew your mind? I mean, we've seen that since
nothing,
Google Glass.
nothing.
That's just recycled Google Glass.
Exactly. So it was very disappointing. I mean, Rokid and Xreal, I think, were the real players there. Rokid being the underdog. Xreal had a tremendous, I mean, they're demoing. I got a private demo of their new 6DoF glasses. I mean, they're really pushing hard
Mhm,
on spatial computing in a way that really no one outside of Meta is right now.
mhm.
So, that was the message there. And generally, I was disappointed with the show. Um, keynote by Delta. I mean, come on, because they're putting better displays in their airplanes. So, I mean, I thought that was kind of a jump the shark keynote. It's like, really, the airplanes, of course, airplanes are incredible technology. But are they consumer technology? Do
Yeah.
they really belong at that show? But again, it's the consumer everything show. So I guess, airlines are a legit everything. And they certainly are filled with technology, but to, do a keynote and then announce you're putting better displays in the seat backs is, I just don't get it. But, the thing about a festival, which is really what CES is, they take what the year gives them. And some years, it's really a lot of spectacular, new, exciting stuff. Stuff like Ant Reality. Remember how exciting that demo was?
Mhm,
And, where are those guys today?
mhm.
So you can also kind of keep score at CES a little bit. I mean, I know the big companies like Microsoft and Meta aren't really there, although Meta was there this year. And they had their own little thing at the hotel where you could try the glasses. Of course, Luxottica had a great booth where people were trying the Meta Quest, I mean the Meta Ray-Bans, which are, again, as I've said before, I think really wonderful product and super popular because they are just practically useful. And the addition of AI, even the limited way they've done it so far shows tremendous potential for wearables going forward. So that's why I was kind of disappointed with the show because I mean, based on what Meta is doing, the fast followers, come on, guys. you know, and a lot of them have subscriptions if you want to use a lot of AI, it's open AI and they charge you for it. So just generally not very inspiring this year. And again, no fault of CES. The thing I would blame CES for is Eureka Park is a mess. You can't find anything. The signage is awful. It's the worst it's ever been. It's so funny because the app is good and it works well at the convention center. It was not working inside of Eureka Park, so you couldn't use it for wayfinding. The signs were, as always, inaccurate and confusing. You couldn't find people. I don't mind walking around. The randomness of it is kind of fun. Oh, here's glasses next to, somebody who's, desalinating water. So,
Yeah.
but that was my hot take on the show. What was yours, Ted?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think as a veteran of CES for 25 probably plus shows now, um, it ebbs and flows, right? There are moments where you start to see major forces of change being represented extraordinarily well at CES, and other moments where things have to sort of take their natural order of the universe. Like not every year is going to be this massive new sort of like new things coming. I guess I was reflecting on, because CES has largely become a computer show now. So it's interesting, when you go through the legacy of the history of all this, Comdex and CES kind of lived in this weird sort of checkerboard, and then CES became the dominant force, and Comdex kind of drifted away into nothing. Comdex is back, just hidden under the guise of CES, right? And things reach a certain level of technology maturity. So the television world that used to be a big bastion of CES, really important point of CES, became kind of yeah, of course you've got big giant televisions, and of course you can make clear displays, but there's nothing really dramatically new, right? There's the smart home stuff, there's the automatic washer dryer stuff, there's all that stuff, but it doesn't become big news because it's the same as last year and the year before, right? There's no major change. Um, I think maybe, and this is going to take a while to really see its pop year, whatever that year is going to be, call it 2032, 33, whatever it is, as whatever happens with quantum computing, and we touched on this a little bit with Gary, right before CES, whatever happens past binary compute, whatever happens with AI kind of becoming what it's going to mature into when we move past the days of binary compute will maybe be the next major shift in everybody's got to pay attention to CES right now. Up until then, CES may be in its little kind of quiet period, right?
Well, I
That's
think the scale of the disruption may be too big even for CES at the moment.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
it's sort of like there's nothing to see yet. And that was the point. Dean, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I overslept.
And we
Looks
all
like
know
you're still
why.
in Vegas.
Are you
Hi,
Yeah.
Dean.
Hello. Hey, Ronnie.
Yeah, it definitely looks like you need some eggs and orange juice. The CES hangover breakfast.
Yeah. Not hungover, just not enough sleep. Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, CES is exhausting, and of course you walk 15 miles a day.
Hmm.
And so Ted and I, so while you were sleeping, Ted and I, we're doing our hot takes on CES, and in a way, it's kind of good that you missed that because now you'll have a completely fresh perspective because everybody's CES is a little different.
Hmm. Yeah, no, thanks. Where do you want me to answer or start? What did,
Well, I think go from the 100,000 foot view and then drill down as you want. What were your
Mhm.
biggest sort of walk away takeaways of this year's show? The vibe, the feel, the deliverables, the important, impactful stuff, if anything.
Okay. Well, I think I would start with Jensen Huang's keynote speech and note that the AI hype that everybody's been talked about the show for a couple of years now. I feel like it's real, and that we're getting to some magical applications of AI that are coming fast and really you know sort of fulfilling a lot of that promise. And he talked about how their graphics card is using this thing technology called DLSS 4. It's the successor to something that was called DLSS 3.5, and it basically uses AI to predict what the next pixel the graphics card should draw will be, and out of and basically it led using AI then to figure out what the graphics card should do has led to an 8 times speed up in the frame rate for running games. And so if you had I don't know it's something like 270 frames a second that the new graphics cards can do compared to or again, divide that by 8, and that was what the last generation did. And you never get that kind of speed up in graphics performance from one generation to another now. It's usually incremental gains. Um, I don't know how much everybody's going to notice that that kind of change in a 4K game. It will make the best games speed up. It's kind of coming just in time for something like Grand Theft Auto 6, I think. So that's pretty amazing just by itself. But he also talked about robotics and how they have uh, these blueprints now that uh, for for AI, like this Cosmos uh, physical world platform, and what that would do is, you know, produce a ton of data for testing robots in and physical AI. They're basically going to be able to teach robots how to understand the physical world much faster by giving them synthetic data, which is data that is simulated from things like digital twins. And that is going to be huge because it basically speeds up the um, you know uh, testing for
The training model, the training
training.
time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's a big deal, and then we're going to get robots faster. So next year's show logically is going to be full of all kinds of robots.
I thought we might see more this year, but it looks like next year is probably a better bet at this point.
Yeah.
So we sort of saw the low end robots this year. Maybe we'll see the high end, more mature, more
Mhm.
sophisticated robots next year.
It's
I guess we'll.
interesting how many toys there
Mhm.
were that were leveraging AI and robotics, and maybe that makes sense, right? Because
Mhm.
it was toys that we first saw the handheld video games that were the precursor
Yeah.
to game consoles.
There's a company called I guess Schiffler that had uh, a robot from Agility Robots in their booth, and I went to go see that because it was in the Nvidia keynote as well, and it was basically mechanical robot that was walking around picking up boxes from a stack of boxes and putting them on a conveyor belt, and um, they're one that used Nvidia technology, the Isaac technology to train, and uh, it was working fine. So it's and in some ways that's scary because that can replace a lot of people, a lot of jobs that people do, but they noted that these robots are being developed in areas where for years there's been chronic shortages of people available and trained to do the work, and so uh, that's part of the usual sort of pro robot argument that I think you know uh, makes a fair amount of sense. That John Deere also showed up with a bunch of tractors that are self-driving again, and uh, they also note that there's a chronic shortage of farm workers as well.
Yeah.
So uh, those industrial robots and enterprise robots, they're definitely showing up.
Well, and
Oshkosh helps them too. Yeah.
the farming industry, for now many generations, call it hundreds, probably thousands of years, have been a key demonstrator of human assist, right? The oxen is the first sort of biologically powered robot, as it were. And now we have, gigantic farming machines that one person sitting in a head end, sort of like a giant sort of watch over situation can be pushing buttons and run gigantic moving vehicles that sort of do population sort of level um, sort of tasks that, to your point, very few people want to do. Although Roni makes the opposite point of a few minutes ago about the human labor conundrum of it all. But you're right that the farming industry is actually one of the most innovative industries on the planet in terms of robotics at scale. And they continue to prove that. John Deere shows that every single year in some fashion.
I forget the name of the company, but they are electrifying and automating the company's truck fleets. And
Yeah,
there's no doubt in the next 10 years, we'll see these automated truck fleets in a big line on the interstates
Yeah.
going to, switching yards where they would be charged and switch up onto other trucks. So there'll be some new jobs created, but
yeah.
millions of old jobs are going to go away. And there'll be a huge realignment of a sector of the economy, which supports about 10 million people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so Roni's point that, maybe just because it could be done, should it be done? Because the responsibility for those 10 million workers is going to be spread among all of us.
Yeah.
That's true.
I have a Dean question. This is like right up your alley, Dean. So
Okay.
Elon in late Q4 announced that he's going to do gaming and AI,
Mhm.
right? Then recently he announces some kind of Diablo super high score, which to me, he must have been using his AI stuff on that because people are like, how did he have the time to become one of the best Diablo players overnight, plus run 6 companies and blah, blah, blah. But if you then read that he's building an AI gaming company, there's some connection there. But I'd love to know what your take is on what you think AI and gaming really does. Not like just in terms of like graphic card frame rate changes, but from a player experience. Like, what do you think could change for players if you've got AI woven correctly into games?
Well, they've been promoting much smarter NPCs, non-player characters, for a while, and in-world AI is one of the companies working on that. I think the payoff isn't quite there yet because one of the first things everybody started trying was um, to hook up Chat GPT to the NPCs so that they would be able to have a conversation with players that lasted longer than 3 questions or so, and to give them enough brains really to be able to answer just about any question and to be able to talk for an hour or so. But now I think everybody also feels like that was too ambitious, but not the right answer for how to make the NPCs more believable and immersive for what their purpose is in the game, right? And so, if you have a blacksmith in a game, you want to be able to talk to the blacksmith about all kinds of things and not hear the same robotic, or not robotics, the wrong word now, but the same repetitive answers, right?
Yeah, just those
But
little loops that they record and drop in, and you can get the same answer over and over again, but you can't really have a conversation with it, right? So,
yeah, yeah. But you also don't want the blacksmith to know everything there is to know about atomic energy, right? And so people are going to goof off in the game, and it's going to break the immersion, and that's not what you want in a lot of these narrative games. You want them to serve the purpose of telling you, oh, you should go check out this thing over in that part of the game because I suspect that what you're looking for is over there. That kind of sort of narrative purpose of NPCs has always sort of been there, but now it's overkill to give them so much knowledge, and so then how much knowledge do you need to give them uh, that still makes them appear to be intelligent, as opposed to sort of rote, I guess. Right.
Well,
So
And Dean, it's going to take a bit before like an out of work actor sitting in an apartment pretending to be that NPC is. I mean, that right now that out of work actor is going to be a lot better than a Chat GPT in terms of staying on the narrative through line and things like that. But
yeah,
that's what has to get solved, right?
In-world system, which is really quite elaborate and tries to imbue the characters with some personality and backstory, has too much latency. So it
yeah,
has to be
yeah.
like kind of a robot, right? It can't be a human character because human
Mhm.
characters would be much more spontaneous. So you ask the robot a question and then
Yeah.
beat, 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 robotic. So
Yeah.
it's still limited. I do think the edge compute, edge AI that we were talking about with more powerful PCs might address that.
Yeah, we should actually
As
get
Dean
Dean's
said,
opinion
and
on that.
as Dean points out, the model right now is probably loaded up with way too much information that it needs to play the role that it's playing inside the game.
We
And that
should
also could deal with the latency as well.
we should get Dean's opinion on the edge compute sort of push away from the grid cloud remote compute for all AI tasks to a more kind of accepted how we use computers today, as everyone has lots of processors in their own home and work environments, and they localize a
Mhm.
lot of the processings. And that was obviously a push
Yeah,
by Nvidia and AMD and Qualcomm and others and Intel for whatever's
yeah.
left.
Everybody was talking about AI PCs, right? And
Mhm.
embedding a lot more NPU neural processing units into these home machines, and that's great for things like privacy, because then you can do a lot of the AI processing of your own personal sensitive data inside your home, and the data never needs to leave for a data center where like it could be hacked, it could be intercepted, your private information's at risk, and so that makes a whole lot of sense for the AI PCs. Um, but I think you also run into these limitations of how many tops you can get into your home machine, right? And I think a lot of it was around something like 55 tops at this year's show, and maybe if you added up all the tops in the machine, it's like 99 or so.
I'm sorry,
um,
you're saying tops? What?
tops, yeah. I guess what I think. I forget what it's an AI measurement.
Tensor
Yeah,
programmable something.
Operations per second.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, and and sort of just the raw cost of it. Like, what did Jensen say that the little home AI appliance would be 3,000 US, something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's real cost to that too, right? That,
Yeah,
but if you look at what people spend on their iPhones, their Android phones, their overall compute stack, for most sort of average people in the world, they're spending a few $1,000s every couple years on owning their stuff, right? So I don't see this as really changing that much. I think it's probably the right trend, and I think for normal average AI stuff, like we're running stuff on M3 Mac processors locally, and it's amazing what it can do
yeah,
and returns things much quicker, back to you. And you don't have to worry about this whole tokenized economy and what am I really getting? And, I'm going to run an AI query and then it comes back with something completely nonsensical. And you kind of wonder, are they gaming me here? Or are they trying to just make me burn all the tokens that I bought before I get the answer I want? Kind of
Well,
thing.
Mhm.
let me ask Dean a follow-up question because
There is a sort of a bit of a slight tangent that I find to be very fascinating with on games and AI, by the way. So, um, I wrote about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and they had they're the perfect game that is sort of the bridge between simulation and gaming, right? And they came out with a game 4 years ago, and they started moving into making it a cloud-based game, and they still had to have something like 500 gigabytes of data on your hard drive, right? If you added up everything in the game. And forward to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 that came out this year, and it has 4,000 times more data on the world, on the ground, uh, uh, in what effectively they call a digital twin of the Earth, right? And they use things like very realistic models created by the aircraft manufacturers themselves for the planes, and they get ground data in the form of flight data from the cameras that look down at the Earth when the planes are flying over it, and so uh, they have made that into almost all cloud computing game. So they're kind of going the opposite direction, and it's only a 50 gigabyte or 50 to 100 gigabyte download now, and so they cut the amount that actually has to be downloaded onto your machine, and then they launched it, and sadly, the launch did not go very well. They ran into all kinds of online gaming problems where people could not connect. They've now fixed a lot of that, and so this very cloud heavy game kind of going in the opposite direction of where a lot of this AI processing has been going, where AI processing been going to the edge, whereas a game like Flight Simulator has gone almost all to the cloud.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's like one of those unsung amazing games that if you want to understand, like if you put on like a Vario VR headset with a really good connection and you have the whole control system, you are in the metaverse. Like if you don't understand what the metaverse can mean and you get into a plane in flight sim with a really good VR headset, this is like a $10,000 rig and you need a gig up and down fiber, but you can experience all the nonsense people are talking about in a way that's like pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a super geek on this stuff. So, and Dean, when are we going to see that turn into like all kinds of games, like where all sorts of game worlds have that level of fidelity and scale and explorability? Because that is what everyone was promised. When you say these words like metaverse and AI and XR together, I actually think Flight Sim is coming closer on many levels than most other companies with
Yeah.
Flight Sim 24.
Yeah, flight sim, is amazing. And the headline I had on one of the interviews I did, like, when I did interviews, they all talked about, uh, a digital twin of the Earth is their goal and their ambition, right? And many companies have kind of come out and said that they need this or they want this, and like Nvidia had created Earth 2 for the sake of weather simulation and figuring out climate change for decades to come. And, so they need a meter level accurate rendering of the Earth. And that's not so different from what, say, Flight Sim needs as well. And I said that, the metaverse isn't dead. It just moved inside Microsoft Flight Simulator, right? And yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to there. And then there are other developers who have gone different routes that are equally ambitious. And so, Hello Games, the company that made the game No Man's Sky, has taken what I guess was their procedural generation of planets technology, and they're working on their next game that will be generating a whole planet, a single planet, but a whole planet the size of the Earth. And it's going to be like a science fiction world that they're coming out with. And they did this, they have 12 people in their company, right? About, I think, 6 years ago now, they split in half, and 6 of them went off to make this new game. And they're going to, evidently pull it off. No Man's Sky came out 10 years ago, and it still has a very big audience, and they're updating it regularly. And with the half dozen people, they made this game that's going to generate a whole planet's worth of content. And then Brendan Green, who created PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, also recently announced how much headway he's made with a similar ambitious plan to create a game world that's the size of the Earth, and then can regenerate almost every time you log in, right? So they all have some of the same ambitions, but they're approaching these things in very different ways. So I'm glad to see the stuff is coming, but yeah, it's not here yet.
So we're coming up on the hour, so we're going to have to wrap up our conversation. So much we did not talk about. I really was interested in your take on Sony's presence. They had a lot to show off. Usually, most companies like Microsoft and Google are not there. They have their own developer conferences. That's why it was surprising to see Meta's presence for the first time. But so I was interested in your take on that, and also, you mentioned at the top, and I haven't gotten back to it, the magical applications of AI. So I was interested in your take on that too. But we're not
Got
going
to bring them back. We got to bring them
bring you back. That's
All
what
right.
happens on this podcast. We got to bring
Yeah.
you back.
Sorry I was so late too.
No worries. It was great to see you and to have you on the podcast. That's what we got, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.